You are an addiction therapist.
Yep.
Your business card says freedom from addiction, hope for life. Let's start with that.
All right.
Why, in the name of your company, is Compassionate Beginnings? So let's talk about that.
Okay. So I'm a person in long-term recovery from cocaine addiction, marijuana addiction, and alcohol addiction. And it took a long time for me to get it and a long time to recover. I had been in and out of a spiritual path my whole life. I came from a very abusive, emotionally destructive background. I used the dance to escape. And I was a professional dancer for many years. I went to Juilliard School of Music. But I learned in dance how to shut down and just be and physically do something else. But I also learned from some of the greats how to mix vodka in with the coffee and club all night at Studio 54 and do lines and what have you.
So you were at Studio 54?
Oh, many times. Wow. One too many times. That's why I got kicked out of Juilliard. But, so I tried to immerse myself in my art, but the addiction had already taken hold. And so I destroyed a career and tried 15 other careers, and that's the last count is 15. But for every attempt to alter who I was or try and escape my own addiction or my own pain, it just didn't arrive. And so I would see the bottom of a bottle again and just, it was like I was in this vortex of pain, and I just couldn't seem to escape. But the moments of relief were the moments when I would come back to a spiritual practice. And my spiritual practice originated when I was very young and exposed to Buddhism. And I would go to retreats, or I would, be bound and determined that I could quit if I just would meditate long enough and hard enough. And there was a night in 1994 on November 27th, the day of Thanksgiving, that I literally was holding on to the grass of a soccer field, afraid I was going to fall off the planet, because I knew, finally, I admitted to myself, I am an alcoholic, I'm an addict, I can't do this anymore. And from that day forward, I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I immersed myself in a spiritual program. And I took my recovery really seriously, because I knew it wasn't just the drink or the drugs from the past. There was a pain that was insurmountable, that had a depth to it, that was such a wound that if it wasn't cleansed, that would fester and I would never heal. So I entered therapy. And it was a long journey. It was a good 5 years before I felt that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Wow. I now have, as of tomorrow, 22 years. And so one of the things that I learned very early on was to have compassion for myself. So, I believe that we can be free from addiction. I truly believe that. But I believe that it comes from a place within ourselves, that if there's just a spark, a little tiny spark, right? And with help from others, that spark can become the flame that will ignite and move us through the veil of illusion, literally, of, I'm so bad, I'm so wrong, I'm an addict, and we identify with all of these things. But if we can just see ourselves in another person, that we have potential, then we really can be released from addiction. And when we walk through that door of recovery, right, there's no going back, because we've already tasted that nectar of freedom. And even though we may stumble, we may fall, we may have a relapse, we've tasted that nectar. So what I have found for myself as a person in long-term recovery is that I have had nothing but joy for 22 years. Now, I'm a cancer survivor in recovery, and I have always said it was the greatest blessing in my life, because I was sober, and so I could really experience what that was like from a compassionate standpoint, from an awakened standpoint. So,
what kind of cancer?
It was ovarian, uterine, both cancer. So I was cooked.
Wow.
I was cooked. I should not have lived.
So when you
But I
said
did.
cooked, you mean radiation or what? Do you
No, stage 3, grade 4 cancer when they found it. So I was about 8 to 10 weeks away from stage 4, end of life. And I lived. I literally was forced to turn my life over to the care of a higher power as I understood that higher power and let that higher power take over. I had to relinquish control over my body and the outcome and just say, okay, it's in your hands, right? That was huge. And to be able to do that and then come out the other end, it taught me that that is a possibility, right? And because I'm a control freak, right? I got to control things. I got to be the person behind the wheel, right? A typical addict. And so to relinquish, to let go, and to just surrender to an illness that, you know, is undefined in many ways, right? Wow, that taught me a lot. It really taught me a lot. And because of that experience, it's helped me to teach my clients that surrender is possible. Scary as all hell, right? Really scary. But it's possible. And if we have possibility, we have potential. And if we have potential, we have a manifestation. It can occur, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about that then. So prior to turning your will and your life over to the care of God, as you understand God,
Yeah.
to use 12-step
Right.
terminology, did you believe in God? Did you already have, or how did that? Because
Yeah.
for someone, myself, you know, or someone who's an atheist,
Right.
that concept is so difficult for
foreign.
them to grasp.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, like, how did
Sure.
you know, how do you do it?
Yeah.
If
That's
you
a
could-
good question. It's an excellent question, and you know, I can't say God, like Christian God. It's not that way for me, but it is a sense of divinity. It's a sense of purpose. It's a sense of alignment. It's a sense of a truth that goes beyond an understanding. It's a sense of creation in terms of nature and the universe. That there is this something that knows I'm here and I know it is there.
Right.
And I think it's universe. Universe is my higher power. The universe. You know, there's a wonderful saying, religion is for people who believe in hell. Spirituality is for those of us who have been to hell and come back to tell the tale. That is me, to a T.
I love it. I love it. That's great.
Yeah.
So what is addiction, and who gets it?
What is addiction? And who gets it? Wow. Addiction is a disease of the brain. Addiction is genetic. Addiction is an inherited disease. Addiction is pain, in my opinion. It is pain, it is trauma, and it is suffering. So addiction is suffering. And it is because we are either running away from the pain, the trauma, the abuse, we are trying to numb the pain, the trauma, the abuse, or we are fighting the trauma, the pain, and the abuse. Either way, we're clinging to that trauma, pain, and abuse, one way or the other. We're clinging for dear life. Either I want it to go away, or numb it, or run from it, but we can't because we're attached to the story, to the experience. It has embedded in our neurons. It's embedded in our brain. And there's no escape. And what is the irony is the escape is that. So this is addiction. That's freedom. That's recovery. It's counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, you'll have to explain it to me. What do you mean by that?
This is the clinging, right? This is letting go and saying, I surrender. I let go. I can't anymore. Someone else take over because my way isn't working so good, right?
Let me ask you about that then. So there seems to be, the way I interpret that, and I think how a lot of people that are non-addicts would maybe misinterpret that, is if this is genetic and this is something that's a disease of the brain, and then surrendering or letting go, all of a sudden, how does that go in and change the neural pathways? How does that give you your balance of serotonin and dopamine and all the biochemical aspects of it? How does that fix the stressful environment? Just to understand, because as an addict myself, I have my own journey, as have you, to have gone through. And for people that aren't addicts, trying to get them to understand what the hell are these people talking about.
Right. So we have an area of the brain here that is prefrontal cortex, right up in here, which is where negativity resides, negative thinking. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about left hemisphere, it's prefrontal cortex, temporal lobe. And on here, this side, left side, we have prefrontal cortex, positive thinking, all right? Addiction and negative thinking, the thoughts that lead us and embed us and keep us in addiction are here. And this is it. We're just clinging to it. Very little, so we experience depression, anxiety, the circle and cycle of thought that just will destroy us, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't always happen so fast, but if we just let go one thought, let go another thought, let go another thought, and we move those neurons literally by doing so to here. So all of the sayings in the rooms, like one day at a time, and think it through, and whatever it is, think, don't drink, not today. All of the little aphorisms that when you first go in just drive you crazy, right, are actually, in a miraculous way, the very things that make the neurons move and repattern our brain, all right? The other thing that's fascinating is our memory are actually protein bumps on the dendrites. And we have numerous memories that are attached to addiction, all right? And they become very alive, they light up. When we become engaged in recovery, we're learning new things, new patterns, and new ways of being, and those memory bumps start to get strong and are created and become very embedded, if you will, and those other ones die off. They minimize. Now, if you pick up a drink, they wake up again, all right? So that's where relapse comes in as a very dangerous thing to play with. But the more we work on and pursue recovery, the more we shift the neurons to the other side of our pretemporal, and the more we create new memory in our brains, new protein, new ways of being, as well as healing all of those cells that have been killed off, died, and and that's the miracle, all right? So yes, it's genetic, but you can have an individual who comes from an alcoholic family and never picks up a drink and never will drink, right? You have people who come from alcoholic families, may pick up one drink, no, to just have one and never any more. Why do they not become an addict, right? I truly believe it's because they perhaps had a role in a family that was not as a high level suffering as another family member.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is environmental. I think a lot of it is biological. But at the end of the day, the message that I have is there is release and relief. We can heal from it.
So recently the Surgeon General came out with a report that 1 out of 7 Americans is struggling with addiction. Do you have any thoughts on it?
I've read the executive summary, and I read the section on policy and treatment. First, let me say that I think it's absolutely fabulous that this report was put together. I used to work in Health and Human Services in another lifetime. I worked at HHS, and I know the kind of effort that this is. This is a huge report, and it's a very, very big deal. It's historic, right? So I applaud the Surgeon General and his team for coming up with this. The problem that I see is that there really isn't anything new. We're still talking about medication management. We're still talking about evidence-based. We're still talking about cognitive behavioral therapy is the only way to go, and 30 days treatment, and then give them pills and this, that, and the third, in my opinion. as I read it. The reason I call myself an integrative addiction therapist is because I think there's more that we need to bring to the table in treatment. So what does that look like? That looks like detoxing the individual, of course, having therapeutic intervention. But let's try and undo the patterns. Let's try and shift the energy that has been created through addiction. Mm-hmm. Let's engage the individual in yoga. Let's look at their nutrition. Let's look at exercise. Let's look at what they're putting in their bodies. You know, coffee, Diet Coke, cigarettes, etc. All these are poisons. They're poisons. And we need to, you know, really have a revolution here in terms of our approach to addiction. In terms of policy, of course, you know, we do not want to put people in jail as punishment. That's ridiculous, you know. But then let's come up with a standardized policy, if we're going to do so, that we offer individuals treatment of not 28 days, but how about 90? Because with 90, they're going to get a better chance, right? We're still not looking at giving an individual a chance to get past the worst hump of it. 30 days and your brain cells are only just beginning to function, right? So I feel really passionately about this because I personally am working with individuals who, you know, they overdosed on heroin and now they have a felony charge and they're going to go to jail. And, you know, what am I supposed to do with that, right? It's like so frustrating. And of course for them it's devastating. So while I feel that this is a huge effort, that was a lot of work and effort put into it, I think the vision is somewhat limited. And yes, the problem is huge. So we need to look at interdiction of heroin into this country. We have got to look at that. We've got to look at Big Pharma. And yet, when the Surgeon General has a report that comes from the agency where another agency says it's okay to give OxyContin to 11-year-olds, there's a disconnect here. Surgeon General is an HHS, FDA is an HHS. Aren't you people talking to each other? You know, and I know they're not, from my personal experience. So, as much as I really appreciated everything that was put forth, I think that it was limited in terms of the potential that we could as a nation reach. And I think that requires many more players coming to the table to speak frankly and openly, to really understand what is this thing, you know? And there are more players than just the person who's shooting up or taking pills or the soccer mom who had, you know, an accident and now she's popping 20 OxyContins every day. This is no longer Bowery bum or in the gutter. No more. It's no more. Yes, we have that population, but they're far less than the population who are middle class, upper class, blue collar, white collar. Hello. And yet we're not looking at that. We're just constantly shoving the real problem under the table or under the carpet. I think we're doing a disservice as a country, and I think we're doing this disservice certainly to the individuals at risk here. And, you know, so interdiction, agencies talking to each other, treatment. You know, you've got to have a minimum of 90 days, minimum. And so how does that look? So the experiments that are being done in New Hampshire and Massachusetts are phenomenal, where what they're doing is they're taking the money that was seized during drug busts and they're using that money to enable individuals to go to treatment. Because the other thing is the cost of treatment. This treatment is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. I can't get anyone into treatment for under $65,000. So I have families who now have third mortgages on their homes, who one family, they broke their entire 401k, their retirement money is gone, right? And that was for 60 days of treatment. What are we doing? As a former artist, I see art as really something that is critical to be brought into the domain of treatment. I think that when we engage individuals in writing, and I require it for my clients to write, which is an art, okay? Or if they tell me, well, I prefer to paint, fine, then I want you to paint every day. I want you to draw every day. We're releasing dopamine, we're releasing a part of the being that is pure spirit, in my opinion. we're releasing God as we know it. All right? So that process of creation is the same process of creation. And it's the connection of the two. It's that merging that allows a being to have the freedom from addiction and express joyfully, okay? So one of the things that I love, and I keep forgetting his name, but he was one of the band members with Aerosmith. He started a recovery center called Recovery Unplugged.
Is that Joe Perry?
Thank you, Joe Perry. So what a remarkable thing. Most treatment centers take away the iPhone, take away the iPod. You can't listen to music. You bring your guitar into your treatment center, you're not allowed to play it, right? And they engage people in music, and it heals. Of course it does. Sound heals, all right? Many treatment centers now are cottoning on to the fact that if we engage in yoga and we use our physical body, we start to release, which we do. Those, you know, those issues are in the tissues, like Nikki Meyer says, right? It's so true. As a dancer, I know all of my issues were in my body. So whether we paint, whether we draw, I engage my clients to write, to journal, and to use free-form thinking, to just get it out, to use affirmations, what have you. And I'm seeing that's changing neuronal patterns right here, right? So engaging in art, whether it's dance or music or painting, photography, writing, is literally changing the shape and the function of our brain, literally, as does meditation, as does yoga, as does Kundalini. All these things are so powerful. And what if we brought that into treatment? What if we allowed that into treatment and actually encouraged it and called that evidence-based? Because we have the evidence, it's just nobody's going there. Right? It's, no, we're going to do it this way, and this is the only way, and we're going to give them a pill, and then they'll get better. Right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Right? And I got a bridge in Arizona for you. Right? Because they're going to come out, and they're going to relapse, and they're going to go in. And that's the other part of it, is one of the things that was not mentioned in the Surgeon General's report, and is often forgotten, is the family. Right? So I work with a national team in a structured family recovery program that brings the family into recovery. And that is the piece, that is the missing link, in my opinion, where you have the person is in recovery and the family starts a recovery program. And I don't mean come into a treatment center for 1 week or a weekend to get some, information. It's a 1-year commitment. And their program is that missing link for the addict, once that addict has come out of treatment, to not only have the community 12-step, but to have the family actively participating in recovery. So,
how would you summarize your journey through recovery, one word?
Journey through recovery in one word. Transformative. I'm not the person I am, who was, and I'm not yet the person who I will become. Then I'm definitely not the person I was. This is a different person. So for me, yeah, transformative.
So to anyone watching this that feels hopeless,
Yeah.
that doesn't have the money for treatment, that
Right.
doesn't have a family,
Right.
and they're dying inside, they've got behavior or consumption
Yep.
behaviors that are killing them, what do you say to them?
I didn't have a family, I didn't have money, I couldn't go to treatment. And so to share my experience, strength and hope, I walked into a room of AA, I sat in the back, I waited until the meeting was over to pick up my white chip, and I hung on to that white chip for dear life. And I kept telling myself, just don't drink today. Just don't do it today. You can drink tomorrow, but don't drink today. I'd wake up in the morning, don't drink today, drink tomorrow, right? Tomorrow never comes, all right? I threw myself into the 12 steps as if my life depended on it, because it did. Death and insanity were certain for me. I was at that point. I was going to lose my mind. They were going to put me away, or I was going to kill myself in a car crash, driving drunk, or someone else. And so for the first several years, therapy, looking at my diet, changing my diet, engaging in a spiritual practice. It doesn't matter what it is. You can just walk out in nature every single day and touch trees, touch nature, and it will change you. But for me, the 12 steps really, they saved my life. Now, I've since morphed into other things that have given me equal amount of support, but I'm also 20 years out, so I'm shifting and changing. But if I had not had the miracle of that program and the community to support me through some of the worst days, because, by the way, I chose to get sober the first semester of my master's degree. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have graduated with a 4.0 and gone on to do doctoral studies. So, you know, but that's what I would say, is just you're hurting inside, you're dying, you don't think you can get through another day without a drink. Tomorrow's going to come, and it's going to be a new day, and it's going to be today. And today, we can start. We can have an hour of freedom, and that hour is victory, right? Tomorrow's it'll come. We'll wake up, it's going to be today. Today, we can have 2 hours where we're not craving and thinking. And every day that we hold sobriety, hold it, and just have faith that you're not going to fall off the mountain, right? That you will get through it. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, and all of a sudden one day you're not craving and you're not thinking about it, and you're actually looking forward to doing something that ordinarily you wouldn't have in the past. Things start to change, and all of a sudden you have a smile on your face for the first time in years, right? For the first time in years. What a joy. Yeah. For the first time you hear yourself laughing, truly laughing, right? So that's what I would say.
Great.
Don't give up.
Love it. Anything else that you'd like to say that you didn't say?
Gosh. That I'm very grateful, particularly to Tommy Rosen, I have to say, for helping me to bring into my practice personally that which I know to be true, but more importantly, validating that which I've known to be true for so many years now. And being able to say, here's the book, right? Here, someone's already put it forth. It's validated. Read every day, read a page of Tommy's book, and you and I will work together as a client and a therapist, and you will heal. And they are. And I have Tommy to thank for that, because prior to, when I worked at treatment centers, when I worked in psychiatric hospitals, when I worked in methadone clinics, and I even mentioned the word meditation or yoga or anything of that sort, I was either suspended or fired. So wow. What does that tell you about the treatment model, right? So now I have a book in my hands that says yes, right? And my book is next. So.